So my personal journey, I've had some books help me along the way. I'm going to have little thumbnails appear sort of in this big vacant area that I use for photos to appear. And these aren't mandatory. You don't have to read them if you don't want to. They're just books that I have found to be really useful, and they've been useful in the way that I've approached some of the books that appear lower down on this list, because I'm going to list these in sort of like a chronological order, if you like, for me having read them as I've made my way along my path over, I don't know, 30 years now. And it's going to go 30 years and you're mentioning like 6, 7 books. That's not a lot. And it's just like, no, because there's also other things. There's other books that are reference books that are more vague. You sort of look on occasion rather than be something you sort of read from front cover to back or whatever. So anyway, I think really the first book I need to mention, and it's one I do need to sort of get possession of again, because I only borrowed it off of my friend, and it's a really interesting read, especially if, like me, you grew up in Essex and you remember the storm in the 80s, because this is a book that talks about that storm and stuff that was going on the sort of the spiritual landscape at the time, and it's quite fascinating. And it's a book called the Black Alchemist, and it is compulsive reading. I mean, it just sort of, when I read it, I found myself drawn into it, and having already started having experiences of my own, and sort of having begun sort of looking into it further, this is something that helped make a lot more sense of the world for me, in some regards. And having sort of lived through the storm, I remember quite well the night it happened. My bed in my bedroom at the time was next to our external wall of our house, and I remember the fact that the wall was sort of moving slightly, which was kind of terrifying as a boy. And then sort of the morning after, first of all being told we shouldn't go out because the winds were still quite strong, and then sort of, I don't know, come afternoon with school being cancelled, some of us were able to go out, and there's things like sort of the Thurrock Technical College, the top roof of the tower it used to have come right off, and sort of the woods that I used to walk through on a regular occasion, and that the sort of trees were knocked over. So it was a severe storm, and The Black Alchemist is a book that has this investigation, supernatural investigation around the storm, around this character, the Black Alchemist, that the author dubs them as the author and their psychic companion sort of pick up this intriguing tale, these signs that leads to this book. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it, and I'm hoping at some point soon I will sort of get a hold of it myself, so I've got a copy of it to read it again, if anything else. So The Black Alchemist, that's the first book that sort of was there at the start of my journey. The next 2 books I want to mention are by the same author, and they're kind of connected, and I'll always say the first one I think a lot of people should read, and that's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. It is quite the book, and it talks about metaphysics, also talks about the author's journey. There's some motorcycle talk. But it's, if you allow yourself to engage with the story, and you're not just reading it for the sake of reading, it really sort of, you really feel yourself pulled into the story, and how Robert Pirsig dealt with his search for quality. And the interesting thing is like his search for quality came about from him being a teacher and an offhand comment of someone sort of saying, "I hope you're teaching something of quality." And a lot of the book is centered on how we define what is quality, and the fact that Robert Pirsig, in the persona of his alter ego Phaedra, pretty much has a mental breakdown in his search for the definition of quality, which, don't let that put you off, because it's not sort of, I don't know, lots of sleepless nights and sort of a story of depression. It's not. It's a story about how we sort of define experience, I suppose. There is a, I think it might have been author's notes at the start. It might be at the end of sort of, because I mean this is a book that was written and published in the 70s, and sort of you go on the journey with Robert Pirsig, his son, and some friends, and it's quite sort of it's quite sad when you read in the author's notes how sort of his son was actually killed. That's quite sort of, I don't know, chilling when you've read the book and his son has been sort of a part of the book. And it also leads into his sequel book, which, calling it a sequel is not really the right thing, but it's a continuation of Robert Pirsig's search into defining metaphysics and quality. And it's also about looking at how other people perceive the world, which is, let's say, it is a completely different book to Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And this book is called Lila. But it really continues the journey, but it's its own journey. And it's a really good book. Definitely read Zen, and if you really want to, and I do recommend reading Lila as well, because there's just something about the way Robert Pirsig wrote that's just sort of, and personally for me, it spoke to me in many ways, and I feel the richer for having read them. So that books 2 and 3 by the same author. Books 4 and 5 are by the same author as well. And you may look at my selection of books and go, I can see a little sort of trend in what you're mentioning here. Obviously, same author, Richard Bach, and the first book is called Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. This is a beautiful little book. It's written in a way that you're meant to take this book, and this is sort of something I've carried on, in particular when it gets to my last book. It's one of those books that the idea is you just open it up at random at a page, and the page will give you wisdom about something to do with your day. If you need guidance, that page, by random chance, will give you insight into how you should deal with a day. But the actual book tells this story of the author flying his plane, and he sort of links up with another guy who basically understands all the truths of the universe and how to make the universe work for them, or alternatively how they live within that, and how there are no parameters unless we set those parameters for ourselves. You could say it's self-belief, a guide to self-belief, or again, it's like with Robert Pirsig, it's about understanding the metaphysics of life and the fact that the power is there for us to use. I don't want to go into it too much, and it's a short book. You can sit down in an afternoon and, I don't know, spend an hour or two reading it, and you could, and as said, the beauty is you can go back to it, and you can go back to it, and it's very similar in some respects to the second book by Richard Bach, which is Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which you look that up on YouTube, and there's videos on it, music's been done, and there's talks about doing a film, or there is a film, and that. And again, like with Illusions, it's about a journey of exploration and pushing your own limits and pushing through boundaries. And it's all told from the perspective of Jonathan the Seagull, who wants to achieve the best sort of speed that a seagull can achieve, which sounds really simple. You might think, are you just trying to sort of give me another book to read like Watership Down? And it's no, because this is different. It's about spiritual awareness. It's about your awareness, and taking that book and being able to just enjoy reading through it, as there's all the common things that anyone who's, what should we say, thinks a little bit different to the majority, and pushes their own limits to break barriers and to show the way in which we don't have to live within the expectations of our society. Because as Jonathan starts to sort of master how, like, little details, like little angles of his feathers as he's sort of achieving his top speed, and that affect him, and he has crashes, he fails, and the other seagulls mock him. I'm sure it doesn't sound familiar to anyone at all. It's with the practice and the failure and the getting himself back up again and continuing to do it that he proves that his way of thinking has merit, and goes on to sort of do incredible things, which I think is just a magnificently beautiful little book that, I don't know, even thinking about the story, it just makes me want to smile a little bit, because you can see the parallels, and it's just sort of really good for picking yourself up. And it's probably even smaller than Illusions. That, I'm going to say, these are two books that are little books, but they're little nuggets of gold, if you like, for a theme. My last book, I mean, this is a book that's got multiple translations, and it's the book that's impacted my life this year in particular. And again, I like to think, I've brought from Illusions the idea that you can open the book up at any page and it will give you wisdom. It's ideal for this book, and that's the Havamal, the Words of Odin, the sayings of the High One. There are multiple translations. A lot of people say sort of Jackson Crawford. I'm going to show him because he deserves a mention. Gives you a well-rounded translation, along with the Old Norse in it. But there are other copies. Asatru UK have their own copy. And then you can also get older copies, travel Havamals. It's been translated a lot, and there's always variations to the translations, but the Jackson Crawford is probably ideal to begin with, and depending on where you are or where you're at, if you want to, you can look at alternate translations or not. But the one thing I found when I have sort of read through it is, and this is a almost like a mundane revelation. It's just you go, that's just common sense, surely. And you do that a lot when reading through the Havamal. I don't want to go into it too much because these are books I'm recommending you read, and I don't want to tell you what's in there. I want to maybe say consider reading these books, but the richness comes from you reading them if you want to. Because again, it isn't mandatory. You don't have to do this. These are a bunch of books that have been powerful, I would say, in shaping who I am. So with that, they're sort of the books I recommend. There are others. There are other people who do YouTube programs or talks or sort of run communities, and they will suggest some of these, maybe none of these, others. And it's always at your discretion what you want to read. If you want to read it at all, you might look for an audio book of it or for other people talking about it. That's not what I want to do. I want to sort of make suggestions, but you don't have to listen to me. You make your own decisions. So this has been my sort of breakdown of books that have influenced me. I hope you like it. I hope you consider reading them. And if you don't, that's okay too. I'll see you in my next video. Thank you very much.